This is a recording of a Pages of Hackney event that took place on Friday the 14th of October 2022, when we welcomed Emily Ogden and Adam Phillips to the shop to discuss Emily's essay collection, On Not Knowing, published by Peninsula Press. Emily Ogden is the author of On Not Knowing, How to Love and Other Essays. Her first book, Credulity, A Cultural History of US Mesmerism, came out with University of Chicago Press in 2018. Her writing has appeared in the Yale Review, Critical Inquiry, the New York Times, American Literature, and the LA Review of Books Quarterly Journal, among other publications. The chair for tonight is Adam Phillips. Adam is a practicing psychoanalyst, author and essayist. John Banville has praised him as one of the finest prose stylists at work in the language. He's the author of many books, including, most recently, The Cure for Psychoanalysis and On Getting Better.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Pages of Hackney, for having us. This is wonderful, and thanks to all of you for being here. I thought I would just start at the beginning, which is invariably my practice after I think of starting somewhere in the middle. So these are the first few pages of the book from the chapter, How to Catch a Minnow. The world burns, yet the fire is not bright enough to read a map by. Nor am I mostly reading. I'm still sweeping the dirt out of the corners and intercepting my children's arms halfway through the act of smashing a glass on the stone ground. I am still trying to use fruit before it rots. The light flickers. Revelation is no common thing. When it comes, it really lasts. It is not necessarily present at the end of the world. How to love, what to do in the dim times. These are the questions of On Not Knowing. From the book of Revelation in the Bible, most people remember the apocalyptic prophecy. But the book begins with ordinary failures. A sword-mouthed being dictates John the Revelator's letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor, present-day Turkey. The angel scolds Pergamum for worshiping false idols. He tells Sardis, "Wake up." In the letter to Ephesus, he complains, "I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first." Before the end of the world, even while the world is ending, the book of Revelation concerns itself with dailiness, as though there were a close relationship between the lightning strike and the dimness into which it subsides. The world has mundanity, duration, bullshit. Many nonsense tasks must be completed. False spirits must be tried and rejected. Long periods pass in which nothing illuminating happens. Write to Sardis and tell them it can never add up. Write to Pergamum and tell them you still have to hold your children, fetch them tissues, and find boxes for their caterpillars. Leviathan threatens. Mostly I see minnows. Looking for the fossilized, for something, persons and places thick and encrusted with final shape, writes Elizabeth Hardwick. Instead, there are many, many minnows, wildly swimming, trembling, vigilant to escape the net. A person can want a clear view and not get it. A person can believe decisive action is required and yet not know how to begin. I would up heart were it not like lead, but my whole clock's run down. My heart, the all-controlling weight, I have no key to lift again. So says Starbuck, the first mate of the Pequod in Moby Dick, overmatched by the tyranny of Ahab. Unfitness to pursue our researches in the unfathomable waters. Unfitness to act, too. To see the encrusted form might be best, but to attend to the minnows as they present themselves is better than to feign a monumental vision and then live by it. In this book, I try to resist the temptation to turn away from things as I find them. Blurry, quicksilver, unhandsome. At the edge of a midsummer river, a handful of minnows hangs in the bright brown light. Their silver noses point toward the branch that shelters them from the current. They hover with the busy motionlessness of bees. Minnows call the hand. Without decision, my arm darts out. The fish sense my intention propagating itself toward them. They have lateral line organs that permit them to feel as a kind of matrix the motions of others in the water. They are gone so fast, it is as if their leaving caused my fingers to touch the river, and not the other way around. It is troublesome enough to catch a single minnow in a stream. Now imagine a whole school of herring, radiating silver from every point. Massive schools may improve the odds of survival for any individual fish, although it's not clear why. It might be the case that marine predators struggle to focalize upon a single fish among many. It's not that they're bad at focusing, but that they're too good at it. Their targeting capacity is too easily triggered. The impulse to fix every fish in their sight prevents them from sighting a single one completely. They start to fix their eyes on one. Before they've even begun, they get distracted by another one and try to focus on it instead. The process is never complete. A human being, also a predator, will find it impossible to keep an eye on one starling in a flock of thousands. Conceptual efforts stumble in the face of the world's vast calamitous tides. Nonetheless, it's human beings who, in the aggregate, have set those tides on foot. No act, no failure to act, no use or squandering of resources that does not mark me as the author of another's destruction. Orca-like, I can't focus. Minnow-like, I respond unthinkingly to the fact of others' turning. In the execution of my acts, I entail action on others in my turn. As difficult as it is for me to think one thought among a proliferation of thoughts, I would appear to be at the same time effortlessly prolific in my complicity. My school has destroyed a planet. Unknowing is on every side of the predicament. Unknowing is there in the terminal flight into frozen innocence with which some of us try to protect ourselves from knowledge of our culpability. Unknowing is there, too, in the uncertainty one may feel when confronted with the problem of how to repair the damage. And unknowing will still be there if one finds a way to live that one can live with. For the few fish captured, many more will escape the net. If there is a kind of unknowing that could serve now, it is not the defensiveness of willful ignorance, but the defenselessness of not knowing yet. Can a person go back to the unpruned adjectives of immediate experience? Before one summed up this moment in history, what exactly was it? What, lying under the summary, what, swimming chaotically beneath any pretense of certainty? What, before the predator's eye, confounded itself? What was it? What does it continue to be? When I talk about unknowing, I'm not talking about the refusal to know what can be known, or about the simple accident of not having found something out yet, nor even, although this is warmer, about the fact that we will each absorb only a finite amount of knowledge in the course of our finite lives. Instead, I'm talking about a capacity to hold the position of not knowing yet, possibly of not knowing ever. I'm talking about living with the dimness that I will mostly inhabit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just as a preface to this, I just want to say that this is a wonderful and remarkable book, and anybody who is interested in anything should really read it.
Thank you.
Can we just start at the beginning? How did it come about that the book took this form?
Well, I started out writing some very definite essays in which I explained everything you needed to know about different aspects of unknowing. So there was an essay about surprise and an essay about irony and an essay about innocence, and there was a pretty obvious performative contradiction, which was that I was occupying a position of knowingness about not knowing, and so I tried to find my way into some kind of less insufferable tone, and it seemed to be the case that that writing about situating myself personally was helpful for that. It wasn't something that I set out to do or thought that I would do, but it seemed to be an effective way of limiting the perspective and making it clear that I didn't see everything. And I was also thinking at the time about what it meant to claim to know certain kinds of things, like to know about art or love or aesthetic value, things that involve value judgments. And it seemed to me that I couldn't come to any kind of bird's eye view of those topics. I had to situate myself. And so I tried to find a style that was situated and came out of some more personal kind of eye.
Yeah. And did the book therefore end up surprising you?
It did. Yeah, it did. Certain essays did, and for a while I was only writing about things that I felt very strongly about. You know, at the very beginning I was only writing about things that poems that made me cry was sort of the criterion, which I'd never done before. It's not my usual criterion. But yeah, what essays were most surprising to me? The essay How to Listen, which is about the opera and my love of the opera, ended up surprising me because it had been in a form originally of kind of definiteness that one's tastes have to be, you know, the taste is a problem because you come to love the things that you love, and then now you know you love them, so you go seek them out in a kind of formulaic way, and you become anxious that they'll disappoint you, and it becomes sort of like a relationship with it becomes like a marriage, you know, and and so I had written about that in a way that felt sort of cute and unsatisfying. And then I started to really think about what it's like to go to the Met Opera in New York and what I love about that. And you know, it's the trashy chandeliers. I love those chandeliers, you know. And so those sort of came back to me. Yeah.
Because the book seems to be very much about, on the one hand, what happens to attract your attention, what you happen to be moved by, struck by. And then, on the other hand, not to be too struck by what one's struck by. Because the book's kind of I don't know if it's anti, but it's sort of anti-revelation.
Yes.
Or it's really questioning what kind of status we're going to give to the aha experience that we all appear to want.
Yeah,
and
that's
if you
right.
don't then value that experience, what do you do with it?
Yeah. And then if you do value it, of course, it can become a state of kind of fixity, or it can become routinized, which I know I learned from you from the beginning, but I've been reading your book on wanting to change, about conversion. And that, you know, this seems to me the word you use is conversion, the word I use is breakthrough, but it's similar. It's that that one wants to find these moments of or at least I have sometimes wanted to find these moments in which everything seems subordinated to one most important thing, and and that everything could be organized under that, whatever it might be, a purpose in life, or a true love.
Or an essence.
Yes, or in essence, and what is it that one is trying to abdicate at those moments, and I think it's that it's abdicating the possibility of being pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised, and that you could leave yourself open to those experiences, but it's painful to be open to them, just as it's painful to close yourself off from them.
Why is it painful?
To be open to surprise?
Yeah.
Because it might not come.
You mean it's always anticipatory at some level?
Yeah.
So when you're surprised, you are expecting something.
I think maybe that's right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, or maybe that it's, what if you just sort of go along being bored for a long time? That's the other possibility, right? And there's a painfulness to that too. Yeah.
Because there's a very amusing sentence. I mean, there are many amusing sentences in the book, but one is your reference to yourself as my long case history in underwhelm.
Yeah. I think that's from the opera essay, maybe.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
It's from the end of that. And it would seem to me that it is interesting to feel oneself to be underwhelmed, so to speak, but it's almost more interesting to think that might be the project. And if that was the project, what then? Because the book seems to be very, very radical and extraordinary, because it really revises an awful lot of things we, if there is a we here, have been educated to believe in. Like, obviously, epiphanies, revelations, surprises, and also continuities. Because it seems to me you're not promoting here sort of endless newness, because there could be no such thing.
No, that's
but
true.
If you're not proposing that, and obviously it's not a tendentious book, it's not a sort of telling us how to live book, but it does have a lot of very interesting statements about, for example, how you might be, as you are a teacher of literature, without having taste that is arrested, like arrested development. So there's a very interesting case in the book for not familiarizing yourself with what you think you like.
Yeah.
Or not getting stuck in, say, the art that you find yourself drawn to. So it's a bit like you should be drawn to it, but not drawn to it.
Yeah.
Or drawn to it and then undo the drawing or something.
Yeah, you maybe need both, like often is the case. But I do think people are very annoying when they're talking about their transcendent experiences sometimes, And so I think you can even hear yourself being annoying while you're doing that sometimes, which isn't to say there are no real transcendent experiences, but there's, I don't know, they're not. You have to come at them from the side or see them through.
But it is striking
vision.
how boring they often are.
Yes.
That somebody is telling you this most extraordinary thing,
Yeah.
and you're sitting there thinking, A, why are you telling me this?
And
B, why is it, what's the big deal here?
And you just think worse and worse of the person, and you don't know why exactly, but they just seem terrible, And so I think I thought about that because I found myself doing it. I'm sure I do it sometimes in the book because of course I'm drawn to that equally as I'm repelled by it. But I found myself thinking about that and it's not just a problem for your auditor, it's a problem for you because you become detached from this genre of being overwhelmed by art that you find yourself reproducing. And so I'm always trying to find ways of sneaking around that. Like I went to the Tate Britain this afternoon, and my process now whenever I go to an art museum is to have no idea what is there or what one is supposed to see, and to just walk ruthlessly past the masterpieces until something attracts my attention. And it's because I have it's so tempting to be dutiful about it and go try to stand before things and stare at them, and and you feel so watched by the other patrons, like you're such a Philistine walking past this masterpiece by Turner or whatever. So I try to let myself be a bit of a Philistine in those situations, and I guess that's where I would want to make a case for being underwhelmed. That I think unless you're willing to see yourself and be seen as underwhelmed, you will never be overwhelmed again.
Or you're actually fighting the wish to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So you're as it were, preparing for your epiphany at any given moment.
Yeah.
So you walk into an art gallery and something's got to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe it hasn't.
Yeah, and it can't if you think.
No.
It can't when you think that it's going to. I mean, sometimes it does anyway. That's the amazing thing about opera to me. Opera seems impervious to this whole dynamic. That's what I love about it. Opera always overwhelms me, even though I worry so much that the time will finally come when it doesn't. But other forms aren't like that. So yeah, I think it's the question of what having committed to something like the importance of something as absurd as the importance of taste and aesthetic experience as a central aspect of one's life. How does one then keep uncommitting so that it's possible to remain committed? I assume this is just sort of standard operating procedure for all kinds of devotional practices. I think.
Yes, it must be.
Yeah, I think that it must be the case. I'm not. I don't have any experience with devotional practices directed toward a god, not personally, but it seems to me this must be just part of the art of that.
Because it's like, people are not serial converters.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be converted, and then that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Whereas William James says, as I'm sure you know this, that really we should be serial converters. We should be all the time being converted and then deconverted. So the whatever it is, the beam of attention keeps moving on.
And if you were a serial converter, would you be converting to a new thing each time, or are you rededicating yourself to the
Well, it's
same?
hard to know, isn't it? And the cult, a lot of the criteria in the culture would say you're clearly not really converted.
Mm-hmm.
That you're obviously a very shallow person. That if you fall in love with 10 people, clearly you have no real passion. That would be the story, and maybe it's true, but it may not be true.
Yeah.
And it may be that one's suffering from an inhibition of this because it would create such instability in oneself.
Yeah. Yeah, I find when I think of serial religious conversion, I get very suspicious, in a way that I don't feel suspicious of serial conversion to art, and maybe I should, But so William James thinks that you should move on to one thing after another as you need it.
Yes, yes, exactly. As you need it, or as your purposes change.
Yeah.
Or the problems you're solving change.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really a sort of, safety versus risk story about the story of a life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, one thing here, which is obviously related to this, is the book's called On Not Knowing How to Love and Other Essays. And there's love is obviously a big theme in this book. And we're immediately drawn to think, well, what's the relationship between not knowing and loving?
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of your, as it were, intention, as far as you know, that these two things particularly would be brought together?
Yes, I think the only time I ever had a one-sentence description of the book that I thought was true was that it was about how knowingness is an obstacle to love.
Yeah.
And at least it is for me, and that one can't, and I mean knowingness as opposed to knowledge, that one can't approach someone that one loves with an attitude of having already figured them out, or it's very crushing to them. I was writing it at the time, my children are still small, but I was writing it when they were even smaller than they are now. They were 2. And it's really clear when you're around small children how crushing your knowingness can be to them, because it's almost impossible not to be crushingly knowing around small children, because you know so much more than they do.
Yeah, and they need you to be knowing.
Yeah, and they need you to be knowing, and you know there's certain kinds of things you can't let them do, like throw themselves downstairs, which they're perfectly prepared to do at a certain age. But on the other hand, you can't just be constantly taking stuff out of their hands and fixing it for them, or you can and do, but you're aware every time you do it of causing a kind of interrupting something that shouldn't have been interrupted.
But you then enter into a world of really serious risk, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have confidence in your children, you risk them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have confidence, obviously you inhibit them.
Yeah.
But it's an impossible dilemma. This
Yes,
would have to be.
it is. Yeah, it is.
Because what isn't clear is, beyond a certain point, how much children want to be known. Because clearly, it's, at some level, they depend upon their needs and wants being sufficiently understood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite easy, I think, to go from that to believing the project in life is to be understood.
Yeah.
Whereas it could be, there are lots of ways in which being understood becomes a defensive procedure. In other words, I could turn myself into someone who's understandable for your benefit, so to speak. And that would conceal an awful lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be true, couldn't it, that as one gets older, it becomes a question of how much of one's own unknowingness one can bear in relation to other people.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I have, in the book, this comes from David Russell, a mutual friend of ours, a story that Marion Milner tells about a game where a boy, Simon, wants her to be a fool, and she says, "I'm a fool." I don't have the exact details, but this really spoke to me that what the required position is, you're a fool, and then you say, okay, I'm a fool, because sometimes it seems to me with children the required position is you're a failure, so my child was trying to bike up the hill the other day, and he couldn't bike up the hill, and I said, it's okay, and he said, stop saying that, and I said, you're very upset, it's not okay. He said, stop saying that. And I think what he wanted was for me to be wrong in some way, I was amply wrong, so you can't, sometimes you can't win except by losing, and the best you can do is lose and sort of tolerate it. But
you can also see, I don't mean you, but one can also see that one's knowingness is a self-cure for an anxiety state.
Yes.
And so that's the problem in a way,
Yes.
is how you get back to what the anxiety is, that the knowingness is there to cure.
Mm-hmm.
And it can feel fathomless, that, in a way, because it goes back such a very, very long way.
And that's where knowingness is related to something like conversion. Like you talk about conversion being something that you do when you can no longer manage your own complexity. And conversion is a form of knowingness. It's a form of saying, this is the solution, this is the one most important thing, and I can let the rest of it fall away. And
But in a way, I think the logical conclusion of this position is that when I know what I want, I don't. It's like there's a line of Randall Jarrell poem called The Sick Child, where the child says, if I can think of it, it isn't what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And it then makes sociability very much more interesting.
Yeah.
Because on the knowing model, you could think my job as a mother or father or whatever is to provide them with what they want, as though at least one of us can know.
Yeah.
And it may be partly that, obviously, it has to be to some extent that, but it might also be to prevent the child narrowing their mind, so they need to believe they know what they want, as opposed to thinking it's an endless experiment. You go on finding out.
Yeah, that's right. And it's tolerable to go on finding out in some way.
Yeah. And otherwise you rigidify into a character, like a character in a novel.
Yeah.
Where you can list your preferences, what you like to eat, the kind of people you like, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very reassuring, but obviously very preemptive in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember when my kid was 2, he was very upset and he cried, "I want something that I want. Give me something that I want." Yeah, we do. Yeah, I think I've quoted so many times in talking about this book something that you wrote in your book from a long time ago, I guess now, but it's very fresh to me, on Kissing, Tickling, and Being Bored, that that perversion is knowing exactly what we want.
Yeah.
And I think that was really, for me, a kind of crystallizing moment of what it was that I wanted to try to think about. I mean, this book is sort of an attempted self-cure for a self-cure. It's an attempted self-cure for the self-cure of knowingness, which is an old tendency of mine, but also a scholarly tendency. I mean,
I was going to say, because it's a lot about your professional identity. Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it came after kind of that identity being secure, and so I could start to think about what it had cost to secure it in some ways.
Did writing this affect your teaching?
It has made me feel a little disconnected from my teaching, because I don't quite know how to teach in this way.
Yeah, because that would be the really interesting project, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Not only how to live in this way, but how to teach in this way.
Yeah, I don't really know how to do that. So I do feel it has come a little bit out of a crisis of teaching. There's a you might know Jonathan Lear. Jonathan Lear has a book about irony, a case for irony, which I read late after, I think maybe after writing this, but he says that irony in the Socratic sense is when you stop knowing how to go on and you sort of stand in the road and you remain committed to the thing that you were committed to, whether it's teaching or whatever. Teaching is one of his examples, but you don't know how to do it. And I feel as though I've been, at least at some moments, in a crisis of that kind about teaching. I remain committed to it, but I don't know how to do it anymore. I know how to do the routines of it that I learned to do.
Yeah.
I think I'm pulling that off on whatever level one can pull off those kinds of routines. But I do. It remains an open question for me how teaching could look more like writing this way.
Is not knowing how to do it, not knowing what you want from it?
Not knowing what I'm allowed to do, I think the problem with teaching for me, I'd be curious to hear what you think about this, but it seems to me that there's a lot of transferential dynamics in a classroom, especially now that I'm obviously not my students' age, which is still relatively recent for me. When I was obviously something like their age, it was a bit different. And I worry that anything that would be sort of transgressive of what's expected in a classroom, or transgressive of what we think knowledge should look like, might seem almost coercive, because when authority figures say transgress, I think that's one of the worst things authority figures can do. So I worry that that's what I would end up doing. I've tried to sort of maintain something like the position of, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I really don't think like the Dead Poets Society type teacher who stands on the chair and says we abrogate all rules. I think it's very unfair to students. It's frightening.
And tyrannical.
And tyrannical in a much worse way than it is if you just accept that you're the authority in the room and bear that burden. So I don't want to offload that burden. Yeah. And I haven't figured out what, because this book, from certain perspectives, is transgressive in its little way of academic norms about what knowledge looks like. Thank you.
Don't you? I mean, it is, if you were to take this book seriously, so to speak, which presumably you and I have, the consequences in terms of, say, teaching, and certainly in the way psychoanalysis, would be very, very significant.
Well, thanks. I don't myself see quite what they are, so I don't know how to do it.
Well, I was struck when reading this book. The psychoanalyst Winnicott said once, when I'm practicing psychoanalyst, when I'm tired, I start teaching the patient. And that, in a way, is a clue about this, I think.
Yeah.
Which is, that there's because we've all obviously been acculturated along these lines, the easiest thing to do is to fall into a kind of informing model.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and I can tell you what I know. And of course, it's very simple-minded, but it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, in analysis, in a way, it's sort of the opposite, which is you start from the, well, in one version of this, you start from the principle that obviously no one's going to absolutely know, and indeed the most offensive thing that anybody can do is take flight into their own omniscience. That the thing that's going to sabotage development and curiosity is omniscience. So if that's, as it were, the enemy, or that's what you're up against, you're trying to have a conversation, which is, it's a conversation about what stops you having a conversation, in a way. But obviously it's also about addressing people's suffering. But the suffering is very, very often the result of false knowing. You know, I thought I knew what I wanted.
Yeah.
I think I know who I am, and all that stuff. And then the question becomes how, not how you make people change, because obviously you can't make people change, but how you facilitate a process you have to believe in. It's a bit along the lines of this book, which is a wish in people to go on being curious, or going on wanting to be surprised, as opposed to wanting to come to authoritative conclusions about things.
How do you teach people to be a psychoanalyst?
Well, it's a real mystery, this,
Yeah.
because in one sense, obviously, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can't teach people what to say when, and you can't exactly teach people how to listen, but you can show them what you might be attentive to.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're doing that, of course, you haven't got free-floating attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's already been selective.
Right.
And so it's hard, you can't get out of that, I think. But what you can do is show people how they try not to have conversations with people.
You can, like, what they do in order to stop the conversation
And to
from
preempt
happening.
it.
Yeah.
Or to over-direct it.
Mm-hmm.
And to free, I mean, in a way, although you don't say this, and this isn't a model of free association, but it's closer
Mm-hmm.
to promoting an idea of free association
Yeah.
than it is promoting an idea of formulation.
That's true. And one of the things that I really tried to do is not have transitions and arguments, you know,
yeah.
because I find that so oppressive in academic writing. At least, I don't mean that I find it oppressive when anyone does it, but I hate having to do it. It feels like such a chore. And so, you know, partly I wanted to be released from it, but also I think there's certain kinds of thinking you can't do when you're making your little transitions and your little topic sentences.
Yeah. And in a way, the transitions become over-tendentious.
Mm-hmm. They
it's
do.
as though you know
Yeah.
from where you're going and where you're going to.
Yeah, they do.
There's also do you mind if I read a bit of your book?
No, that'd be great. Thank you. I'd love to hear that.
The book, inevitably, because of things we're saying, is very interesting morally, or if that's the right word. And there's a very interesting section about animals and herding sheep, say, and the use of the word ornery.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point you refer to this. This was in it's a nursery rhyme in a collection, and then there's a commentary, and this is it. If I had a donkey that wouldn't go, do you think I'd beat him? Oh no, no. I'd put him in a barn and give him some corn, the best little donkey that ever was born. And this is Emily's commentary on this. The non sequitur is what takes my breath away. No pause to justify the donkey. No voicing of, then responding to, the person who would condemn the donkey. No psychologizing of the animal. He wanted attention, he was frightened, and so on. No naturalization of his behavior as a phase, as what donkeys do. It's not that he's a dumb animal. It's not even that, Christian-like, you will care for him because he is a sinner. No, there is simply no reasoning about it. He refuses, you will care and praise. These are the roles that you and the ornery have with respect to each other. The rhyme instructs. So he refuses, you will care and praise. And the book makes a very, very strong case for managing what you call the recalcitrance of the world without hating it, because it's recalcitrant. Mm-hmm. And it's very much seems to be, in psychoanalytic language, it's a book against a certain kind of narcissism. And it's a book that wants to avoid being in a narcissistic rage with the world and other people.
Yeah, that's right. Only because I'm often in one, you know. It's not that I've solved this problem. Yeah. I remember reading in The Transit of Venus about this, I can't even remember the character's name, but she's just awful. She's the villain. And one of the things that's bad about her is that she she's always getting angry at the world, the physical world, when it resists her. Like her coat gets caught in a door and she gets into a snit. And I thought, no, that's me. And it is this sort of idea that one goes through the day sort of thinking things should comply.
Yeah.
And so this radical reminder from this nursery rhyme that things shouldn't comply. I mean, on some level, that's what one should. I mean, on some level, it's just not giving a reason at all. But if one had to give a reason, it would be that the fact that the world doesn't comply lets you know that you're not alone in it. There's other people are in it, right? I mean, that is what is reassuring about
unless it's too
non-compliance of the world.
uncompliant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, if you think of sort of a child waiting for its mother, say.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Beyond a certain time, the longer you wait, when the person comes, you can't bear them.
That's true.
They just can't come back.
Yeah.
And so it's something to do with optimizing this, isn't it? A feeling you have that the world is sufficiently cooperative, but that when it isn't, you don't assume it's an insult.
Yeah, and when it is, you assume it happened by chance or by accident or not by your will. I mean, that's the magic of it, is that if it's too compliant all the time, it's as if you made it.
Yeah, and then there's no world.
And then there's no
only
world.
You.
Yeah. But if it doesn't ever comply, then there's no world that's any good to you. Yeah. And I guess that's why it's nice that in the nursery rhyme it's about the donkey, because it's from the perspective of the person who cares, and so one doesn't have the problem of the infant who meets a world that is totally inadequate to it. It's it's from the perspective of adulthood that you've made it this far, and now
yes, and you'd think in a way, if you really cared or loved someone, you'd love precisely where they resist you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it obviously sounds a little counterintuitive, but those would be the points where you met them rather than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the question is whether you could bear that.
Yeah. And the answer is sometimes, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think probably everybody has the experience of loving the people they love because they resist them sometimes, and then other times that's what's enraging about them.
And the question then is what happens to the rage?
Yeah.
If that stays as some grudge or stain, or whether you get over it.
Yeah.
Can I just read another bit of the book? I mean, one could read a lot of this, but anyway. This is about taste, and it's related to what we're talking about. Surprise matters to aesthetic experience as it does to a cure. To form a taste is a joy, but to have a taste imperils the very pleasure that led you to form it in the first place. There I am, liking the sort of thing I like. I have a personality, but do I still have a passion? Have I abandoned the love I had at first by practicing it? And then you quote from Miss Jean Brodie. This is a quote. For those who like that sort of thing, that is the sort of thing they like. The expression comes from Muriel Sparks' The Prime Miss Jean Brodie, where Miss Brodie uses it to give a frosty dismissal to those whose taste she doesn't approve. But one could give the tautology another turn. It might be taken to describe a problem many lovers of art have with themselves. It's possible to be hobbled by our tastes, or by our conscious ideas of them anyway. Trapped with our ideas of the sort of thing we like, we find we don't quite like those things after all. We don't like only them, we don't like them unfailingly. Taste is not a duty we can obey, nor will it obey us. It wells up from somewhere, it comes in through the side door. It is at its best a surprise. And that, of course, makes what you don't know more important than what you do know. All the time.
Yeah.
It's like it's like Charles Lamb's injunction. It's good to love the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a chapter that's about. This is from the opera chapter, which I was going to read a little bit of later, and so I'm glad that you took us there, because it's the germ of that chapter is that. Now that we talk about being irritated by people we love, is that I live in a household where everybody likes loud music except for me, but occasionally I do like loud music, And so the chapter is about loud, overwhelming music, and there's a whole, there's parts of it that are not there anymore that were about the loud music that my husband loves and how irritating it is to me, except when it's transcendently beautiful, So I think it is the same problem in a different key of needing to be a little bit ruffled or irritated by things in order for them to feel like they come from outside of you in some way.
Yes, or being able to see their opportunities.
Yeah.
As opposed to insults.
Yeah.
Can I just read another little bit from that same chapter out opera? You may be going to read this later, but just this brief bit. You say here, I'm sceptical of what I love and of whether I love it or have been pretending all this time to be the kind of person who would. I fear I might have put this taste in my employment, routinized it. I think so because I have. As an English professor, I draw a salary for routinizing my tastes in 4 syllables annually. Enthusiasm is my day job. A great sentence. What else could I do but at a certain point become someone based on the best indications I had of who I was?
Yeah, and it's such a problem of middle age, to have, if you're lucky enough to have gotten a job that you love, now you have a job that you love.
Yeah. But in a sense, then there'd be no cultural history, would there?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, or at least there wouldn't be a canon of things that we would refer to, because that would be taken to be the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to read that chapter?
I do. I want to read a part about the opera, because the opera, for whatever reason, is sort of the solution of this problem for me. Also, I think I might quote you. I might just read a little bit.
Can I just quote you again?
Yeah, sure. Because I quote you in this chapter, actually, the same one I quoted already. But anyway, we might get to that.
The other sense I think we should be struck by, among many, is I do not think a person should ever permit themselves to be reliably moved. It's worth thinking about.
After she has been in the chapter.
Yeah. No, I know. Against my better judgment.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the opera. I'm just describing I had just described the first time I saw. Oh yeah, I'm hitting the microphone. Just an amateur error. There we go. The first time that I had seen opera, and it was the Tales of Hoffmann in New York, and I was in college, and I went with a friend. After we'd been drinking way too much the night before, and we were, got up 3 hours later and got on the train. We were freezing. It was just the most squalid experience. And then we got to the Met, which I don't know if you've seen the Met Opera in New York, but it's just this transcendently beautiful, gaudy thing. It's like all carpeted in red velvet and has these huge crystal chandeliers. It's very tacky, but it's like tackiness done with so much money that it becomes just beautiful. I just love it. And it's just something delightful about that whoever decorated it really understood what the opera was. It's not it's not for tasteful restraint. That's not why people go. So anyway, I've always loved the Met ever since then. And then this is a paragraph about the opera. Ever since then, my love for opera has been of an intensity that makes me doubt. Surely this time, whatever it is, will not be there. But opera speaks with an air horn, telling you to take your seats, warning you it will go on whether or not you do. Gilded, tapestried, appointed, opera's lavish outlay defeats my equally lavish outlay of self-doubt. The puffy red-carpeted stairs of the Met in New York shush me, its Art Deco crystal chandeliers a few feet too close to the floor promise never to ask if I still love them. The high, hot air of the foyer blazes with its confidence that I do. In Lucia di Lammermoor, they had a real Irish wolfhound. I am not too good for such ceremonies of waste and expenditure. Opera's blare gives a balm that a reserved art form, one that I know that it knows that we are playing, would not be able to give me. Dogged ardor meets my skepticism best. And I think there's something about non-winking, non-ironic forms that is very soothing to the overthinker, and that's how opera seems. There's just no irony in opera, at least not in the 19th century operas. Maybe some 20th century ones that it's introduced somewhere. I don't know, but.
Do you feel at one point you say in the book, "I'm not equipped to solve the problem of my skepticism." Do you feel like your skepticism sort of keeps you going?
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, it saves me maybe from doing too much effusing about being stopped in the road by the beautiful artwork and the sublimity of it all and so forth. So maybe it's that they both have to be in conversation in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe the same point, but one's skepticism is a way of protecting oneself from the immediacy of experience and for the potential to feel overwhelmed or the fantasy of being overwhelmed.
Or maybe when skepticism is a way of erecting the walls again so they can be broken down. I mean, the problem with like these kinds of breakthroughs is that they keep happening over and over again. I mean, one thing that skepticism permits is that they can.
Yeah. Okay. Just briefly before you read, there are sort of riveting moments in this book where it feels as though there is a crisis in it, not a crisis, but there are a series of crises. At one point you say, right, the question life presents is no longer am I wanted, but rather do I want it, life that is. And in that moment it seems to me it's almost as though not that the book is emblematized, but there is something very, very powerfully condensed in that, isn't it? Because once you flip over, because you can see how the project of being wanted keeps you going, not you, one going. But the question of whether you want it is very, very powerful in this, isn't it? Because presumably one of the questions around here is, if we're not really seduced by epiphanies and revelations, what's going to keep us going?
Yeah.
Why continue?
That's right. And this is it's funny because I turned to the same chapter. I changed what I was going to read, and we both came to the same chapter. And it's a chapter about a couple of things. It's partly about Eurydice. The story of Eurydice, of course, being that she dies by a snake bite, and her husband Orpheus comes to get her from Hades, and then he is told he can take her back because he sings so beautifully that even Hades is moved, and so he's told he can take her back if he won't look back at her as she comes. And there's one could offer so many different readings of the scene, but the one that I offer is to flip it around and say, well, did Eurydice want to live again? And so the question being, does she want to go back? And there are a few different versions of that question in the chapter, but the question is exactly what you said, Adam, that knowing life is what it is, and coming to a moment in middle age where the sort of constant distractions of other people wanting one or trying to figure out what to commit to are no longer there. Do you still want it? Knowing what it is and knowing that it won't keep distracting you with these shiny baubles in quite the way that it did. And the closing scene of the chapter is about a character of a prostitute in Fellini's Le Notti di Cabiria. I don't know if you know that film. So I just want to read the description of that scene. At the end of Federico Fellini's Le Notti di Cabiria, the actress Giulietta Messina stands up, turns away from her death, and walks back through the dusk to the upper world. Messina plays Cabiria, an indomitably cheerful prostitute who has carefully saved over years to leave her profession and buy a house. She's in love, she thinks it's mutual, and they marry, but it turns out he has planned all along to kill her and steal her life savings. Soon after their wedding, he takes her to the edge of a cliff to see the sunset, then tries to push her off. She sees what he means to do just in time and saves herself. But now, having snatched back her life, does she really want it? Not at first. She collapses in despair at her husband's feet, crying out again and again, kill me, I don't want to live any longer. He runs away, leaving the problem of life on her hands. The screen flickers to black as if Cabiria has fainted. We see her again in the twilight. The sunset is over. She stands herself up. Her wedding suit is dusted with debris. A teardrop of mascara stands in the corner of her left eye. There's nothing for it but to walk uphill before darkness definitively falls, to walk out of Hades, following, albeit hours after, in the footsteps of her worthless Orpheus. The question that Fellini and Messina pose, they were creative partners and married, is not whether he will look back. It's whether she will. Hell, you see, writes Andrew Formentel, is an exact replica of the living world where you and I live, a surface projected into a cardboard eternity where eras are superimposed on one another from reflection to reflection. But what is different in the living world is our consent not to know already everything there is to know, not to model the desertions of the flim-flam man onto every young affair, not to look behind, but to wonder what is up beyond the corner. As Cabiria reaches the road, a little festival of spring suddenly weaves itself around her. For no reason that realism can furnish, dancers, an accordion player, and a couple on a moped populate the road. These happy fools try to include her. They are singing, dancing, covered in flowers. They look about 20. She looks 39. She knows better. They do not. It is as if the dancers say to her, "Are you a fool?" They are the fools, but she tucks the burden under her arm and says, "Yes, I am a fool." She cheers up, though the tear-shaped smudge of mascara is still visible in her left eye. She gives a glance of puckish acknowledgement to each of the dancers, then to the camera, and to we fools beyond it, too.
Just before we open it up to the audience, what do you like about your writing?
I like that it's sudden sometimes. That's what I value in it. Shall we conclude? Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Adam.
Pleasure. Thank you.
If you would like to buy On Not Knowing, please head to our website pagesofhackney.co.uk, where you can buy it for collection from the bookshop or for delivery nationwide. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe wherever you find your podcasts for more literary events like this one.